So who am I? Why have I got the right to have an opinion about this? Well, I'm the pre-sales director for VMware in the UK and Ireland. I've been at VMware for 8.5 years now. So you can imagine when I joined back in 2007, VMware was that single product company. I'm not going to mention what that product was because I've said I'm not going to use that word. And we've been on a journey which has really started this whole transformation of what's happening in the IT infrastructure. Before that, I was actually a VMware customer and a user. My history is actually running big data centers for service providers, and previously to that, I did my IT apprenticeship, if you like, at IBM back in the days of them moving into global services and the whole birth of the IT outsourcing business. So I've got that legacy in IT. So I am going to try and get through this presentation. I can talk for days on this stuff. I've got 45 minutes. We'll see how it goes. But just sort of emphasising, I don't really want to talk about the technology in too much detail or go into products. Let's talk about something completely different. Let's talk about cars. Let's talk about what's going on in the automotive industry. And this has all hit the news, and actually it's even more in a topic of conversation over the past couple of weeks, because Tesla have actually stolen a march on the whole of the automotive industry, and they've actually now got in beta driverless cars. So who actually knows how many cars a year does Tesla make? Does anybody in the audience know? So I actually had to double check in putting this presentation together. So Tesla ship 30,000 cars a year. So these guys have gone up against global manufacturers with manufacturing capacity in the tens and hundreds of millions of cars a year, and because of their focus and their innovation on technology, they've got there first. Now, if that's not a wake-up call to absolutely everybody in every industry, then I don't know what is. These guys are redefining the way we think about an everyday item, such as the car. And I just absolutely love that. I mean, I'm a geek. If you go back 2 or 3 years, last time I changed my car, an electric car, really? No, it just wasn't a practical option. And these guys, through relentless innovation and just pure focus, have been able to demonstrate that it can be done. And it's coming quicker than any of us would have ever realised. And that's true absolutely everywhere. The whole world is changing, and it just seems like the pace of change is getting faster and faster and faster. And it's absolutely every industry, from automotive, as we've talked about, through technology and mobile telecoms, through publishing, media, transport, agriculture, local government. It's absolutely everywhere. And that transformation is actually being accelerated by the fact that there's a new class of competitors, businesses that we've never even heard of, who started so small in the last couple of years, suddenly have got access to markets and a scale. They can reach consumers that standard businesses just aren't agile enough to get to quickly enough. And this is leading to a new scale of threats for existing businesses. So just think about every industry. I mean, I'd like to run a little bit of a competition here. So just think about pretty much every industry. Let's start with advertising. One of our big customers, we've been very successful working with the likes of WPP over the years. What's going on there? Who's redefined the advertising industry? Anybody want to have a guess? Try and make this a bit more interactive, see if you guys are all still awake. Who's redefined advertising? Absolutely. So you speak to people outside of tech, they may actually say, well, Google's just a search engine. No, they're not. Their revenue's actually driven from advertising, and they're redefining advertising in this new online world. This is an easier one, yeah. Retail. Absolutely. You guys you are awake. You're with me. I'm impressed. And these guys have just taken, completely redefined how we think about shopping and the shopping experience. And you look at the younger generation. I mean, my son, my 20-year-old son, I swear, if he could, he would just refuse to go out of the house. He would just order everything online, and he just uses Amazon to order everything that he needs. Music distribution. This is a controversial one. So, I think it was Apple. I think that's when music distribution changed, and that's when that's what HMV failed to see coming. And this is the one everybody talks about. I get criticised for putting this up there. I've left it in the slide. Every vendor presentation, you have to talk about this. So who's this? What's going on here? Uber. So you have to have the Uber logo in. And every single one of these businesses has been challenged by somebody completely outside of their industry who perhaps even a year ago, certainly 5 years ago, just didn't even exist. And if it happens to these guys, then it can happen in absolutely every business area. And there's a sector that's just not represented on here. So what's the sector that I've deliberately missed, which is particularly relevant to the location to where we're standing right now? Finance just isn't up there. If there's a sector that's ripe to be innovated or out-innovated next, it has to be financial services and banking. And certainly, for VMware and what we're doing around trying to drive IT innovation, financial services sector is a massive area for us that we're working with our customers to try and support them to try and head off some of this challenge that they see coming. But the reality is, this is happening everywhere, and it's coming really, really quickly. If you look at any of the analysts, I've pulled out Gartner here, but if you look at predictions around the Fortune 5,000 in the US, the big incumbents are the guys who are most at risk. The rate of change here is so fast that if you're not on board with this program, then there's a real chance that by 2017, that's really not so far away now, is it? We're talking, just over a year away. A fifth of all of those market leaders are going to be out-innovated by somebody who doesn't even exist yet, or maybe has existed, in the order of 10 years. So what's going on here? What's this about? Well, we've all come to know this word. This word probably didn't exist. When did we first hear this word? It's certainly, in the 21st century. It's the app economy. I'll give you a good example. So who here in this room has still got the same bank account that they had when they were 18 years old? I certainly have. And let's contrast that with what's happening now. Look at the younger generation, and here I'll talk about my daughter. My daughter's 24. My daughter is on her 4th bank account. Now, why is that? It's not because she particularly liked the colour scheme in the branch that she happened to go into when she moved to university, and she thought she'd switch to that branch because they were friendly when she went in there. It's because of the function she gets from the app. So as online banking, mobile banking has become more prevalent, they're actually focusing on bringing in the younger generation through the functionality on their apps. So it started with things like just being able to check your balance, has driven towards how can you find the nearest ATM, and so that you can get information about how to make your banking easier, right the way through to mobile payments and online payments, and then the rise of Apple Pay. So which bank is my daughter with now? Well, clearly it's Nationwide. Why is that? Because they were the first ones to get Apple Pay. So this is really happening, and for that younger generation, this is what banking means to them. Banking is actually on the mobile phone. It's their app. That's the bank. It's not the building on the high street. They don't associate that with the bank anymore. You think about who's actually challenging in this space, the mobile payment companies, the likes of PayPal. There's a massive threat to the financial services industry here, that people who aren't anything to do with traditional banking can just come in and redefine the whole industry. And it's not just banking. I mean, what's actually happening out there on the web, the volume of data that's being produced, the number of transactions that are going on, this is a massive opportunity across this cloud platform for new businesses, for new business dynamics, for people to get creative and come up with new ways to make money that nobody's ever thought of before. I really like that infographic because it gives you an idea of the scale of what's actually going on out there. So what's actually happening here? And this really is the meat of what we talk about at VMware and really drives everything that we're trying to do. And it's this virtuous circle. So we said, it's all about the app, right? So that's what everybody's focused on. That's how people start to think about businesses. That's the point they go to when they want to do something. They go to their app. So as a business, everybody's looking to build that killer app, to find that thing that's going to bring new consumers to them to help them drive their business and drive their revenue. So we've got to get that app out there. So I deploy that app, and as soon as anybody interacts with it, that's going to generate data. And, that links back to that infographic. Every time somebody does anything, that's going to generate some sort of transaction record. I can track that record. As soon as I've got that data, as soon as customers start to transact with me, I can actually learn things about that customer. I can learn things about what that customer actually wanted. How did they actually journey through my application? What worked for them? What did they particularly like to click on? What did they maybe miss as they went through the application that maybe if they'd have only seen that, perhaps they would have stayed a bit longer and maybe spent more money with me. So once I've started to generate this data, then I can do all sorts of analysis on it. Once I've done that analysis, I can use that to actually update and think about how can I change my application so that next time the user comes back to my shop front via my app, maybe they'll spend a bit longer. Maybe they'll actually spend a bit more money with me. And actually, what we're trying to do here is forever drive this cycle faster and faster and faster. So think about the companies that we've already talked about. Think about what Amazon do. Think about what Google do on their platform. What they've built is a platform to allow them to test aspects of their applications, aspects of the consumer experience, and do that at an ever-increasing rate. All the time looking at the results of what they've done, gathering that data, analysing that data, changing their application, trying out new things, and doing that faster and faster and faster and faster. It's exactly what Uber have done, yeah? They're able to just focus on their app, get it out there, play with the user experience, see what works, make it even more compelling for consumers to actually interact with them, drag them in, and then as soon as I've learned something new, get that application updated and refreshed so that I can get the benefit of that. Constantly going around this cycle faster and faster and faster. So let's draw a bit of a contrast. Think about your typical enterprise IT application lifecycle. So Graham actually talked through some numbers out, talking about what he sees in the customer base today, weeks, months. I'd actually say it's far worse than that in my experience. If you really are in a traditional enterprise architecture planning cycle, then you're actually talking about years. Potentially we're talking about 5-year cycles to drive a mission-critical enterprise application, a CRM system that contains all of your business transactions. Every time you change that, you're talking about a massive project that has a massive amount of investment in it and a hugely extended time frame to drive you around that cycle. Who's going to win here? Got your agile companies who can go around this cycle multiple times per day. I've seen references recently that actually Amazon today goes around this cycle on average once every 12 minutes. So if we're competing against them from traditional IT, where we're going around this cycle, once every 2 years? Who's going to win? I think I know the answer to that. So actually, there's a key lesson here for enterprise IT and infrastructure guys. I mean, I'm an infrastructure guy. I said this the other day. I'm an infrastructure guy and I'm proud, yeah? It's all about the applications, but if you don't have the infrastructure underneath to support the applications, then there's not going to be any applications. So what this does for me is highlight that our role as infrastructure people and our relentless focus is to actually support the business to go round this cycle absolutely as fast as we can. And everything we do in supporting the IT environment, supporting the infrastructure, our sole purpose is to do exactly that. If we're doing something that doesn't support this, and heaven forbid, we're doing something that actually slows this down, we really need to question whether that's the right thing to be doing for the future. Because if we are slowing the business down, what are they going to do? Graham said it already. They're just going to pull out their credit card and they're going to go somewhere that does allow them to do this. So we absolutely have to be focused on that. It's coming. You can't stop it. So much of what we've done in enterprise IT over the past 20 years, and I've been part of it, has actually been about let's build it once and let's nail it down and make sure nobody can ever change it. Because we know that's when we start to introduce problems into the environment. That's not going to cut it anymore. Yeah? We need to be focused on this type of approach. So, this is leading to essentially new business priorities. And this is all about innovation. In this environment, as hopefully I've demonstrated to you, if you're not innovating, then you are going to be out-innovated. You've got to have the focus within the business to access new markets, to drive new scale, to bring in new business models, because if you're not focusing on that, then somebody else is going to be doing that for you. And we all know this, it's all about the customer experience. What is it, the famous figure that's quoted? When you go to a website to do something these days, some sort of online function that may be, a transaction or commerce related, the average attention span is 8 seconds before people get bored. If they don't see what they're looking for in 8 seconds, or they can't figure out which button to click next, then you've lost them already, and they're off trying to find somewhere that's easier for them to interact with. And everybody expects it just now. We're into that, consumer-led, I want it when I want it, not when you decide that you think you're going to provide it to me as a business. So it's all about that customer experience and just delighting customers and exceeding their expectations. And it's key here, actually, this is about empowering employees as well. You've got to have the staff, particularly any frontline staff, empowered with the information to meet those demands of the customer up front. So it's about giving them the tools to allow them to do the best job they can and service the needs of the customer. And Graham sort of highlighted this as well. All of this has to be done with a completely faultless focus on security. And we don't have to mention any of the brand names. You've all read it. It's been high profile enough in the press. But we still are in a position in IT where we get it wrong, and it will cost people their jobs, and it will cost companies their survival. The potential impact of security breaches now around personal data and privacy is so severe that we will see major companies go out of business as a result of this. So what are the forces that are driving this? And Graham has set the context for this. It's what we've all we're all in the middle of, and you got the fact that you guys are here sort of highlights to me this. But the two key technology trends that are going on that are enabling this are the rise of cloud, so that ubiquitous availability of compute as an infrastructure that's always available, that I can consume on demand, so the rise of cloud, and then the proliferation of anytime, any place access to the applications and the data that I need in order to be able to do whatever I need. So these are the two forces. These are the two things that we see going on that are just enabling this push. And it is, if you look at the big platform players, these are the technology trends that they're exploiting that are allowing them to outcompete their competitors. Now, one of the great things that the platform players, the rise of these platform players, they're able to focus on just these technologies. And that's what allows them to innovate so quickly and steal a march. Think about Uber, yeah? I mean, they don't own any assets, but their market capitalization, I think, is now, I read a statistic, Uber's market capitalization is now bigger than Ford. But they don't own anything. So they're able to invest all of that IP without being encumbered by the legacy. Everybody in the room here doesn't have that fortunate position. In the real world, everybody is trying to bridge the two worlds of the legacy. Shouldn't really use the term legacy because it sounds a bit disparaging. I heard somebody refer to it recently. Actually, it's heritage. It's our heritage. Yeah? We should be proud of it. We built it, and that's got us where we are today. But we're trying to bridge everything that we've got today for the existing businesses. Their businesses are built on this infrastructure that exists today. You can't just walk away from it and throw it away. That's where all of our customer information is. That's where all of our transaction history is. That's how we know everything about the customer base. That's how we make our money today. But we can't just sit on that and expect to be able to continue running the business the same way and be successful because of all of these things that are going on. We have to bridge it into this new era. And actually, if you think about what VMware has done in our history, what we've actually been able to introduce is some really disruptive technologies that allow you to bring some of these properties of this cloud-like era to some of these heritage technologies. That's exactly what virtualization did to software-defined compute, if you like. So allowing you to start to bring cloud-like properties like automation, orchestration, and policy-driven management to that compute layer. And that's exactly what we're doing to the rest of the data center stack to enable you to start to bring some of the cloud-like facilities, some of these cloud-like properties into your enterprise data center. But none of this is easy. It really isn't easy. These are the sorts of challenges that we come across every day. These are the sorts of challenges that our customers are trying to tackle. We've got these data centers. We've got these data center silos. We've got a CRM system that's built in its own silo, that's been there for 5-6 years. It's core to the business. Actually, the people who built it are no longer here. And actually, we really daren't change it because we really don't understand what the implications are if we go anywhere near it. All these devices that are coming out, I mean, the CEOs and the CFOs are terrible. They demand that they will bring their iPad into the business. No matter how IT tries to lock down security, they're absolutely going to bring and use these devices. And it's IT's responsibility to make sure that when they do that, that security is not left exposed. And what we've seen happen more and more is the fragmented nature of the data center is made even worse by businesses going off and consuming cloud and generating another silo, a cloud-based silo, with a completely different set of management technologies, if indeed there is any management wrapped around it. And one of the implications Graham highlighted, which is absolutely key when we start thinking about cloud-based services, is what about the financial controls that you need around it? If people really are going out and spending on a corporate credit card or even worse on a personal credit card and bringing public cloud services into the business, what happens then? What happens then when corporate audit turns up and wants to understand, well, where are these essential assets being run? Who's actually got control of this? And you can guarantee it will be the CIO who will be asked to sort out the mess at the end of the day. It won't be the lines of business, it won't be the marketing department who are held accountable for the data breach. It'll actually come back into the IT department. So we absolutely can't afford to allow the businesses to go off and do this in an uncontrolled way. We need to start bringing this into a controlled architecture under some sort of control, some sort of policy-based management to give the business these cloud-like services and the properties they demand, but do it in a controlled way. And actually, when you start to think about the detail of what this means, this is a great breakdown of the sorts of things that organisations are going to have to face as we make this transition. And it actually talks about, then and now, sort of referring to this heritage position and where we need to move to in this cloud-based era. I think actually this slide is slightly wrong in actually then is probably now, and now is future for most of us. But actually, these are the sorts of things that we need to be focused on. And for me, the key to this is the very bottom one. This isn't just about the technology, it's actually about the organisation, the people, the processes. And for so long, we focused on building organisation structures, building processes that we put there and we expect them to last. We build things because that's how we're going to run this for the next 5 years. And actually in the future, that's not how this is going to work anymore. We need to start thinking about how we build organisations, we build processes, and we have people in our organisations with the skills that are there to change and to drive change. And it's across every aspect of how we run IT and how we structure the organisation to support IT today. It's about shared assets, not owned assets. So it's much more about OPEX and controlling costs, operational costs, than big capital investment up front. It's about rapid innovation. It's about driving that change. And it's about instant application deployment, not these slow cycles that we've talked about, as we all know. So really, this is about changing the way that we think about IT, changing the way that we think about how we support the infrastructure going forward. And we need to think about these types of concepts. And I guess in a bit of a tip of the hat to Aldous Huxley, we call this brave new IT. So think about Aldous Huxley's book, and you recognise the brave new world. So much of it is familiar, but actually everything is different under the covers when you dig into the detail. And that's what we're talking about here for IT infrastructure. VMware's vision of the IT infrastructure starts with the applications. As we've already highlighted so strongly, it's all about the applications. The value for businesses is in the applications and the data and the transactions and the consumer engagement you get from those applications. But it's not just about the modern cloud-based applications, although they're very important, and that's where a lot of the focus is and that's where a lot of the innovation is. The reality is, think of a number, 90% plus of the business value today is driven from these traditional 3-tier based, possibly even older than that, going back to mainframe applications that are still in the data center. And we need an approach that allows you to apply common practices, common approaches, bring some of these cloud-based approaches to all of the applications, not just the modern new ones. So where do we start from then? Well, we start from virtualizing compute. So that's what VMware have done, and we've defined that market. I've heard I think Graham said that earlier on in his presentation. So that really is the foundation that we're working from here. But virtualizing compute is only the very beginning. You then need to start thinking about all of the other characteristics of the data center and start thinking about bringing those same approaches around virtualization, so abstraction, isolation, the rise of automation and policy-based management, bringing them into the other aspects of the data center. And our focus at the moment is around extending that into networking and the rise of software-defined networking, which is one of the things I'm going to focus on a bit more, and also around storage. So once you've actually got a software abstraction layer across all of the main three components of the data center, compute, network and storage, then you can really start to use the power of IT, the power of compute, to drive automation, policy-based management across every aspect of what you do in the data center. Now for me, that is the foundation of cloud. So if you look at all of the big platform players in the industry, if you look at what Amazon have done with AWS, you look at what Google are doing, essentially that's what they've done. They've built a custom platform that allows them to do exactly this. So VMware's focus is to actually provide you guys with a set of tools and a set of technologies that allows you to do exactly the same thing in your own data center, building your own software-defined data center. But it's not just about your own private data center. It's also using the common set of tools to allow you to make the selection of where is the most appropriate place to run any particular workload. And that's done in the knowledge that whatever you do there, you've got compatibility, so that you can choose to move that workload out to a managed networking provider, and then if you need to, if circumstances change or your relationship with that provider changes, then you can bring that back in again, or you can move it to a different managed service provider. And VMware is absolutely committed to providing that set of tooling to our vCloud Air network partners to give them the ability to give you access to the widest network of managed service providers, to give you the widest choice with the guarantee of compatibility across all of those platforms, because they're built on the same underlying technology. And those workloads will just work wherever you happen to choose for whatever's best for your business. And then in addition to that, we've actually decided that we needed to invest to really jumpstart this whole industry and bring in the enterprise characteristics into this to become a public cloud provider in our own right. And so we have the VMware Cloud Customer Zero, if you will, for our technologies in our own public cloud provision, vCloud Air. So actually, if you want to, you can choose VMware as your service provider. Now, there's some things that are changing here, and you've seen this announced in the press, that we've actually brought all of our public cloud assets together from across the EMC Federation, and we've actually brought them all together under a new brand, VirtuStream. And VirtuStream is an existing, very mature cloud provider focused in the SAP space. Please don't feel that means anything changes. VirtuStream remains a completely VMware-owned brand, and the vCloud Air service remains exactly as it was in that new structure. So we're still absolutely committed to this public cloud networking, maintaining compatibility across all three of those strands. So you've got the choice of your own data center, you've got this massive network of over 4,000 managed service providers who are using the same tool set to give you compatibility across these managed services, and then you've got the VMware owned and driven public cloud if you really are into that on-demand public cloud environment with no requirement to purchase any assets. So actually, we define that as one cloud. And for those of you who've been around in the IT industry as long as I have, of course, Thomas J. Watson from IBM, I think many, many years ago, predicted that in the future there would be demand for approximately one computer. I think we're predicting here that in the future there will be demand for one cloud. And what I mean by that is that actually you need to start thinking about these clouds as a single seamless infrastructure where you can then make policy and business governance based decisions where you need to place individual workloads. And it should only be driven by those business and policy based decisions, not any technology considerations, because actually under the covers it's completely seamless and compatible And you've got the guarantee that if something changes in your business, you can then change those decisions and bring things back in-house or go to a different provider because your security requirements have changed. So these are sort of the first two layers of the strategy. We also recognise, and there's a broad ecosystem of partners that we've worked with historically and continue to work with, and some of them are in the room today from the likes of Nutanix. That there's a variety of ways that you may actually want to build that cloud infrastructure. So if you think about what's happened historically, the role of enterprise IT has essentially been to build that. So you go out to the infrastructure, to the industry, and you make your best of breed component selection, and you build your own. You assemble all of the components, and you do all the hard work to make sure all this stuff works together. And that's how we've built these large enterprise IT organisations. Their job has been to make sure this stuff integrated and worked together. Well, that's not the only solution anymore, and we've seen over the past 4 to 5 years the rise of converged infrastructure solutions, where the vendors are actually working to take some of that responsibility away from you and building these converged infrastructure platforms that you can essentially now just buy a rack and have that rack delivered, shipped to your data center, and it's very few connections, very short startup time. You just power the thing on, and you can then actually start to deploy workloads on it. And then the next evolution of that, which I'm sure we're going to hear more about this afternoon, is around hyper-converged infrastructure. Now, if you think about, again, the big cloud platform players, so what they're doing is, at least in some aspects, we've heard the word used already, starting to think about the hardware as a commodity. So they don't actually panic too much if an individual server fails. What they actually do is they've got all the intelligence built into the software layer to cope with that failure. And if an individual hardware node fails, all they do is just mark it as bad, and sometime later somebody comes along, recognises that that node's failed, they swap it out, throw that one away, and install a new one. So I'm reluctant to use the word commodity because actually that hardware layer is very specialised. And actually, if you look at what the big platform players have done, they've actually commissioned and built their own specific hardware based on their specific requirements and filled their data centres absolutely chock full with many, many racks full of exactly those identical servers that they've custom specified. So if you think about the rise of hyper-converged, what the IT industry is trying to do here is provide enterprise IT with exactly that ability, so that you actually start to think of everything that you need to provide a data center is just contained within these many, many individual nodes that you just buy as a complete unit. And you plug it in, and the infrastructure software layer recognizes that you've added a new node in and just makes it available to your compute cluster automatically. And that's the third alternative way to start thinking about how you build your own cloud. No VMware presentation would be complete without also identifying that none of this is really important unless you're focused on the access layer. How are your users able to get access to these applications and data to allow them to do their job from wherever they happen to be in this mobile world? So we're focused on making sure that we can provide access to all of this cloud infrastructure from any device, wherever you happen to be in the network, all under the control of IT, with the right and appropriate security policies, all under the control of IT. So this is VMware's architecture for the new IT. Fundamentally, it's this 3-layer stack around one cloud supporting any application, giving you access from any device. So that's a high-level view. I didn't mean to say this at the beginning, actually. This is a 50,000-foot view of VMware strategy. I'm not here on my own today, so Darren and Andy, my colleagues from VMware, are here. We're going to be here all morning, so if there are questions, we'll be around. I will get to give people the ability to ask questions in a bit. So this brave new IT, which is focused on innovation, customer experience and security, when we work with our customers, these are the sorts of things that they're focused on. I mean, all of that's very well. It's a It's a great, theoretical architecture for the changes we need to make in IT, but how on earth do you start? We've got this heritage in our data centers. What are the steps that you might take? And these are the sorts of things that we see our customers focused on, that are the types of projects they're working on to actually help them take their existing infrastructure towards this vision of agile, highly secure, and user-focused IT. So there's no real pattern here. It's not a prescriptive journey, but you get a sense of the types of projects that people are focused on. And some of them you'll recognise. I mean, the very first one on my left here, data centre virtualisation, and then extension to hybrid cloud, is really focused on what we've been doing for so many years around server consolidation, standardisation on that virtualisation layer in the data centre, and improvement of all the operational processes around that to give you the operational efficiency, but now extending that out to this network of managed providers or to your public cloud provider of choice. And that's where we're still very focused with our customers, making sure they are getting the best value from the infrastructure assets that they've got deployed in their own data centers, and driving operational efficiency. Once you've actually got that standard infrastructure layer in place, the real next focus is starting to bring automation in place. The real focus for VMware right now, I'm not going to use the H word, we don't talk about that layer anymore, is around how you drive operational efficiency once you've got that standard layer in your data center. You've got virtualization established, you've got a virtualization first policy. Well, if you leave all of your operational procedures exactly the same as they were, the worst environment is you've got this fantastic virtual infrastructure that allows you to do many, many things, but actually you're in an environment where if somebody wants to vMotion a virtual machine from one to another because you've got a power supply that's failing, then they have to raise a change to do that. They've not focused on the operational processes that allow them to exploit the technology advances that they put into the data center. And so they need to bring in some of the new technologies like vRealize operations to give them the data to allow them to really drive the efficiency in their operations. And then next after that, you need to start bringing in provisioning automation and application delivery automation. Start thinking about how can I bring some of those cloud-like properties where I can just go to a portal, to an Amazon-like web store, and order my IT services. And so much of where we're spending our time with our customers now is trying to support IT to do that, so that they can bring all of this shadow IT, all of these silos of cloud compute back under the control of core IT, because fundamentally they're going to be held accountable for it anyway. Business and mobility, the rise of all these mobile devices, which IT may or may not be in control of, bring your own device, wanting to have this ability for people to make their choices about how they want to work and the devices they want to use. We're very focused on making sure we've got the policy-based management framework in place to allow IT to support that. And then right across to the very right-hand side, this infrastructure has to support those mission-critical, highly available database infrastructures that support the heritage systems that the businesses rely on today. So having high availability characteristics, full support for disaster recovery, business continuity type solutions is absolutely part of what we do. What I wanted to spend a little bit of time focused on just in the last few minutes of my presentation is this concept that Graham has introduced around security controls native to the IT infrastructure. So if you think about how we have historically built security into the IT infrastructure, so much of the investment goes to the perimeter. Graham referred to it as this castle model, that actually the walls of the castle are your first and your last line of defense. And if you think about how we build security architectures today, that's actually a big part of the focus. It's the perimeter firewalls. And actually, so many of the exploits that we're hearing about that are making headlines today, what's happening here is the biggest threat is actually from inside the perimeter. It's from people who've already got access to your data center or to an open network. So many of these networks, once you're inside the perimeter, they actually have very little control. And actually, in the traditional model, thinking about the physical hardware-based model of IT security, actually if you were to try to drive greater granularity of control, the level of investment that you need to put in place to deploy physical firewalls to allow you to do that, or if you do this in maybe a more structured way using VLAN controls and zoning, actually the level of complexity very quickly becomes operationally infeasible. And so that's how we're in this situation where once you get through that perimeter firewall, organizations find themselves wide open. And this is exactly the scenario that's leading to such high profile headlines as we've seen, and it's exactly the scenario that is going to lead to the fall of some very high profile names, and at the very least people in IT losing their jobs. So to give you an idea of maybe a better approach to this, think about your typical three-layer architecture that we've all known and loved, where you've got your perimeter firewall, you've got your web servers in your DMZ, and you've got your app and your database services. And you want to keep those things separate. So finance, HR, and IT. Now the only way I can do that today is by having a complex firewall set and VLAN rules that actually separate the layer 2 networks. And I'm doing all of the control on those two firewalls. So all of the complex firewall rules that go into those firewalls, it's very hard to manage, and the level of complexity is massive. And if this environment is dynamic and I need to change it, I need to build these things in the expectation they are going to change, then actually the level of operational investment I need to put into that is absolutely massive just to keep up. And certainly that's what our customers tell us, and Graham said this as well, you can provision virtual machines to support these three-layer architectures in minutes now. That's not in question. We can do that with virtualization, but what delays it is all of the networking changes and all the security changes that need to be done to secure and provision the network. And that can take weeks, if not months. Now, what if actually native to the infrastructure, I can have a software-based firewall that actually is implemented to control policy and access for every single workload at the virtual machine level. Then I can actually use the power of the software, I can use IT to do what computers are good at, apply those policies consistently, whatever changes get applied to this infrastructure. And that's what VMware is bringing into the market with the products around NSX, our network virtualization product, and this concept Graham introduced of microsegmentation. So now we've got a software automation-driven approach to bringing these security policies right down to the workload layer, giving you a really feasible way to adopt this zero trust approach so that you've got policy-based security right down to the virtual machine level. So typically when I talk about these types of things, people say to me, that's great, Simon, we'll probably be ready to do that in 5 years' time. Well, I'd like to challenge that thinking if that's what people are thinking, because this technology exists today, and actually it's great to be here with Gyrocom because we've got a great joint customer success story. I did actually think that LGC were going to be here today, but I don't think that is the case. I think they're busy off doing something else. But this is a great success story that demonstrates that this technology is here now. So you can start to get the advantages of this policy-based automation and all the agility that goes with it in your data center today. So if you're under pressure because the business leaders, the line of business owners in your company are demanding cloud-like speed, then the tools and the technology to underlie that in your own data center exists today. If you start taking the journey towards a software-defined data center, then all of these characteristics that we talked about along the bottom of improved security, along with flexibility, simplifying your processes at the same time as reducing costs, are there today. And just look at the key thing in this story here, that once they actually started to get to grips with this technology, they actually took the decision to move NSX into full production in their environment inside 4 weeks. So this technology is very mature and it's ready for you to actually take advantage of now. So start thinking about the steps that you're going to take to drive your IT organization on this journey towards software-defined data center. And I guess, my final thought here is really to commend VMware as a partner and working with our partners, the likes of Gyrocom, that actually we're continuously innovating to give you the platform that's going to allow you to take your companies and your IT infrastructure on this journey towards the software-defined data center. So hopefully that's useful. It's a whistle-stop tour. It's a 50,000-foot view. As I said, myself, Andy and Darren are going to be here, so if you've got questions, feel free to approach us during any of the sessions. Are there any questions now?